struggle between one nation and another. The greatest struggle was between a king's virtue and his wickedness. The threat to this throne came first from his own nature. So, what did that mean? What does that mean about China during this time? Yeah. They were, yes, but not 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 quite. Huh? They did, and we're going to get more into that. But what does this mean? It means that they didn't have any outside contact with any other nations. Okay, they were keeping to themselves. And I mentioned this last time. Excuse me. I mean you. Remember, they have a pretty tough geography around them. In the north, in China area, there's a desert, right? Like Mongolian stuff, that's all wide open spaces, but it can get really windy, pretty chilly up there. And there's is that the Gobi? Yeah, the Gobi Desert is up there. To the west of China, maybe I can go back here. Get my map real quick. No. All right. So the north up here is all desert. To the west over here, that's all the mountains. That's the Himalayas. Okay. Down in south here, it gets more tropical. That's more of where the jungles are. Which, if you've been to a jungle, you know it's not easy to get through, right? And then obviously they have those huge coastline of the ocean, and no one's coming from the east right now, right? Over to China. Okay. So they have a lot of factors here that help isolate them. Okay, so if they struggle, where is the struggle going to come from? Internal, right? So then this gets into the moral stuff, right, with the kings and whatnot. Okay, and the wall of China came later. I was just showing you. I just had that picture there to show how their isolation. Okay. So this roughly began in 1766 BC. They're called the Yellow River Civilization because they were building rivers along the Yellow River, okay, which is somewhere down here in this area right here. If you can see my mouse moving. Okay. They're really, the Bronze Age really took place here, right? All this green stuff here, that's actually all bronze, because I think we all know when copper or bronze over time oxidizes and it turns green, right? Okay. Here's where they start to use their alphabet, their writing system. It didn't really have much connection to the spoken language, so you could read this without being able to speak it, and vice versa. You could be able to speak it and not be able to read that. And they use little symbols like in Egypt, right? Hieroglyphics kind of stuff. The lay person would have to know about 1,000 characters, but the high people, right? These scholar people had to know over 10,000 characters. Okay. But they're also trying to seek some kind of divine spirit, some kind of divine presence. Okay. So they would do these kind of pagan type things where they would write little characters on bones or things like that, mainly bones of passed away family members, okay, as a way of like they're still with them, right? Like if they did this, then their family member is still with them and following them from heaven, okay? And they would apply heat to dried bones or turtle shells and read the cracks, kind of like people read your palms, right? Oh, this line means this and this line means that. Well, in this case, they would read the cracks, which is obviously a divine message, right? If you're reading cracks from a turtle shell, okay? All right, keep going here. All right, so the reign of Wu Yi, he reigned for 77 years. That's a long time, okay? So he was kind of the guy who was bringing the downfall to the Shang dynasty. Okay? He was very corrupt. He would show disrespect to the gods, which the people did not like that, did not like him for this. He would cast lots and just say anything that didn't go in his favor, he was like, whatever. These guys are lousy. These gods didn't know what they're talking about. Okay, so he was seen as a serious moral failure, right? And he violated. Hey, there's Brian. Hey, Brian. They would say he violated the king's moral responsibilities. Okay. So which in turn, right? So the king is supposed to be head of the Chinese courts, and since they didn't like him, right? You're supposed to be a good, moral, fair ruler, but he wasn't. Okay? He was very selfish. Okay, and so this is why they didn't like him very much, because he obviously wasn't a fair guy, and he mocked the gods, and apparently the gods didn't like him either because he went out hunting one day and was killed by a lightning strike. So we saw this picture right over here. Okay, where'd he go? Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Come on now. That comes next. This right there, he's like looking up at the sky because he's mocking the gods there in this picture. And he mocked them, so they killed him. It says that they killed him with a lightning strike after that. Okay, so he is succeeded by his grandson who made it even worse. Okay, kind of reminds me of Israel after the split, right? Or even Judah. This kind of one bad king after another. So Chao, Wu Yi's great-grandson, was the worst, and that's him right there. At least when I Googled it, that's what came up. And I like this picture the best. Right? To show him, he's like, got his hand up like, you'll do what I say, kind of thing. All right, so he was gifted, though, and praised for his strength, intelligence, his oratory. By the way, yesterday I said, Danielle and I were watching this show, and apparently Martin Luther King ad-libbed the part of his speech, "I Have a Dream." He ad-libbed that. He just added that in, and we just learned that yesterday. And I was like, well, it makes sense. He's a great orator. And Danielle was like, you know what that word means? Like, yes, I know what the word orator means. There's the orator right here. Right? All right. I wasn't looking for laughs. Then I was, right? Yeah. All right. So, however, he was used for, used this for debauchery, right? He spent his time drinking wine, had all these pleasurable things, a lot of girls, a lot of ladies. He raised taxes just for his lifestyle. Okay, reminds me of some of these Roman kings too, Roman emperors too. Also, maybe even Solomon, right? Which we'll get to that later. So he demanded complete loyalty to him. Okay, so suspects of disloyalty were forced to rely on burning hot rocks. Imagine that being your punishment, right? That'd be crazy. So Chao and the Shang dynasty were attacked by a neighboring tribe. This is like the first time, right, that this has really happened. Okay, Zhao, who lived west of the Shang dynasty. Okay, so King Wen of Zhao was seen as faithful to the moral ways of heaven. His son Wu conquered the Shang dynasty with brute force, which wasn't a very moral thing to do back then. So some people didn't really like that. Okay, they said that this violated the king's integrity. So he needed to justify himself as king, kind of make it right. So he, to gain support, he had a bunch of different offerings, a bunch of different sacrifices to their gods, to repent of his past sins, and he even put down all the weapons that he used against the old dynasty. Okay, those are them right there. Here's King Wen, and there's his son right there, King Wu. All right, so Wu's young son Cheng became king and ruled by regent because of his age. So he was too young. Kind of reminds me of King Tut, right? King Tut was a little bit too young. No, it wasn't King Tut. It was someone else. Anyways, we talked about a guy in Egypt who had to, his mom, I think it was, ruled by regent. That was a Hatshepsut. She ruled by regent because he was too young. So this isn't the first time that this has happened throughout history. All right, anyway, so they came up with this mandate of heaven. Anyone heard of that before? Mandate of heaven? Yeah, kind of. And so this is the first significant contribution to Chinese culture, which is still in part used today, probably not as much. But actually, they probably do believe that their president is appointed by a divine spirit, right? So the king, again, is divinely approved to rule the people and is the intermediary between heaven and earth. Okay? So this mandate gives the king divine authority to act for the good of the nation. So this is the long symbol right here, the one that's being drawn. Okay? What this means, what that means is that those horizontal lines are the different layers, right? So the top one is heaven, the middle one is the king, the bottom, I believe, are the people, and the straight line, I believe that the king is the vertical line because he connects all of them. And the horizontal lines represent those different levels of society, and I think the top one is heaven. So the king connects them all. That's what this sign means. All right, so here's what this means. So the right to rule is granted by heaven. Okay, this is the mandate of heaven, right? It is based on the virtue of the ruler, meaning while they rule justly, fairly, and wisely. Okay, so moral ruling, right? The right to rule is not limited to one dynasty. So can there be different rulers from different families, I'll say? Yes, there can. Okay, it's not limited to one family like the royal family in Britain, for example, or through Egypt, right? But this justifies rebellion as long as the rebellion is successful. So if the king doesn't rule morally how they see it, then they have the right to rebel. But as long as they do it successfully, right? Or else they're probably just going to be put back in their place. All right, so the mandate of heaven is probably the most critical social and political concept in Chinese culture. It has affected its historical change and provided a profound moral theory of government based on the selfless dedication of the ruler to the benefit of the general population. The concept also recreates the Chinese concept of heaven, which was derived from the earlier concept of a, quote, Lord on high, or Shang-Ti, into a force that regulates the moral universe. This moral aspect of heaven, along with the mandate of heaven, influenced Chinese culture and philosophy to focus on moral and social issues more so than perhaps any other ancient culture, at least to date, right? At that time. So we got a few questions here. What are some of the things that we can learn about the worldview of the people of China during this period? Yes, Michael. Oh, okay. So they came much later. I think they came probably close to 1,000 years later. I think. You can Google it. Yes, they were both before Christ. That's for sure. But they came probably not 1,000 years, but they came several hundred years after this. Yes, yeah. All right. So, what are some of the things that we can learn about the worldview of the people of China during David's time? Hmm? Yeah. So they didn't have much, quote, at least worldview, right, of the outside of the world, because they were really isolated, right, and internalized. Okay. So they didn't have much of a worldview outside view. How did three here? How did the mandate of heaven in China historically affect moral reform within the Chinese systems of government, culture, and philosophy? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And they had to be they had to set the example, right, for the people, and that's a good thing, right? Yeah, that's a good thing. In the men's class, we were talking about like Thomas Jefferson, right? He wasn't the most Christian guy out there, right? But what did he do every single Sunday? He went to church every single Sunday, and church was in the Capitol building. Can you imagine that today? How many people would go crazy for having a church service in the Capitol building, right? They would flip. Super church state. Give me a break, okay? Give me a break. Brian's laughing because he and I know exactly what we're talking about here. But yeah, I mean, he went every single day. Now, again, he wasn't the biggest Christian, but why did he go? To set the example for the rest of the nation. Everyone needs to go to church on Sunday, so I'm going to go to church on Sunday, right? That's what he did. All right, question 4 here. How would you compare your worldview with the one that existed in China during David's time? Do you agree with some of these things that they believed in? Yeah, Bill. Mhm. Yep. Probably. Yeah. I mean, did China eventually have outside interference with their nation? Yeah, right. Just like we've been talking about, because like Egypt, right? They controlled everything, all obviously from the Nile all the way up into eastern. Where are you going? Oh yeah, move out of her seat. Get out of the way. Um, uh, you made me lose my train. Oh yeah, Egypt. So from the Nile all the way even to the eastern Mediterranean, right, all the way up through Canaan. But then what happened? Outside forces from Mesopotamia just defeated them and took over, right? So they still had their power shift, especially when the Huns were coming, right? The Huns, that's why they built the Great Wall, was to keep out the Huns. They were coming from the north, from in like Mongolia area. And then we've all heard of Genghis Khan, right? That that guy took over China. He had the world's largest empire back in the day. And we'll get into him later, though, in chapters. We're not getting into him fully right now, okay? But he comes later. All right. So let's go to Solomon now. We're going to go back to Israel here and back to Solomon. Okay. So David dies. Okay. David dies, and Solomon becomes king. He is establishing the new precedent of this dynasty, right, through Israel. So Solomon is the first example of that, of this dynasty through Israel's kings. So how is Solomon a different type of king than David? He wasn't a warrior. Yeah. He was a builder. Okay. Don't read ahead in the book, Jesse. Blessed with God's wisdom. So he's wiser than his dad, right? But his dad's a better fighter. Yeah. Yeah. So there's more peace in the time of Solomon than there was David. Is that thanks to David, maybe? People came to him to hear his wisdom, right? No one did that for David. Someone's sure enough not doing that for me. I'm not very wise. Okay. I'm kind of shocked everyone's still here in the auditorium. All right, so David was a passionate fighter who inspired others to follow him. Solomon was a builder and an impressive manager, right? He reorganized Israel into 12 different districts, right? They're all here, okay? All here. You can Google it if you can't read this picture, because I really can't. But anyways, there's 12 different districts of Israel, okay? Each with their own governor, right? He's king, but he's giving each district, he's giving them kind of their own little sovereignty, just a little bit, right? He reworked the tax system, which we're going to get into later. We'll see how that turns out. And he began to work on the temple, one of the greatest building programs in history, right? Especially in Israel's history. It was 45 feet high. It was made of stone, quarried stone, lined with carved cedar, coated with gold, and filled with treasures. So this took, we talked about this a little bit in the men's class on Wednesday night too. This thing would have been one of the greatest constructions of all time. Not only that, it took lots of money. All right. So Solomon was not only a reputable builder, but he was also for his incredible wealth. He had 12,000 horses in his stables. You had one. I know. That's why I said had. You had one. Oh, and his wisdom, right? And his wisdom. We also talked about this too. He obviously is known as the richest man to ever live, right? I looked this up yesterday, last night when Danielle was telling me, go to bed. I couldn't, because I was looking this stuff up. I know it was. I couldn't help it. So, Everyone's heard of Elon Musk, I'm sure, right? What do you think he's worth? What is Elon Musk worth? He is worth, as of this year, 236.5 billion with a B, billion dollars. Okay, this guy, he's obviously known for Tesla and SpaceX, right? All right, but he's still, where'd it go? He's still not in the top 5 of richest men to ever live. Okay, at $236.5 billion. So number 5 was Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. He was worth $300 billion. Okay, Andrew Carnegie. He was worth $310 billion. Mansa Musa, you guys ever heard of him? Mansa Musa, he was the king, Muslim king in Mali, in Africa, in like West Africa. He was said to have had a net worth of $400 billion. By the way, when he went on his pilgrimage to Mecca, and he went through Egypt, he literally changed the worth of the currency. Because he was just saying, here's money, here's gold. He was just throwing it everywhere. And yeah, he literally changed the currency in Egypt walking through. Crazy. This guy was crazy rich. Next, you guys have heard of this guy, J.D. Rockefeller. $660 billion. That's how much this guy's worth. And then he wants to regulate us to have 5-day work week, or work, 8 hours a day, all this kind of stuff, right? The factory worker, that was this guy. But King Solomon, his net worth, $2 trillion. First ever trillionaire. Probably only ever, but we'll see, right? $2 trillion. This guy's crazy rich, okay? He has nothing to worry about. So his reputation, just like Deanna said, right, was reached outside the borders of Israel, right? He was visited by the Queen of Sheba. That's in 1 Kings 10. Okay, there's your Bible verse. Okay, 1 Kings 10. You're welcome. Okay, I think I have a picture of that right there. Yeah. So 1 Kings 10:1, when the Queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon and his relationship to the Lord, she came to test Solomon with hard questions. So this is Solomon here in the red robe. Queen of Sheba, of course, has someone holding an umbrella for her, right? Because it's too hot, too sunny. Okay. So 1 Kings 10 and verses 10 through 11, it says this, and she gave the king 120 talents of gold, large quantities of spices and precious stones. Never again were so many spices brought in as those the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Hiram's ships brought gold from Ophir, which we talked about that. I know it for sure in the men's class. We've sure talked about that. They're known for their rare gold, precious gold. Okay, and from there they brought great cargoes of almug wood and precious stones. So people were bringing him crazy stuff. So Queen of Sheba. So I think she was more from Ethiopia, which is somewhere by the north, right? By the north right there. Some say she's even from this very southern part of Arabia. This would be like Yemen. So not quite sure where, but she was for sure a very rich and powerful person. Yes, Michael. Yeah, cool, man. So 120 talents is 4.5 tons of gold. So she came with her entourage, for sure, right? So this demonstrated how extensive international trade had become, right? It just great. About done. All right. So we'll finish this page here and then we'll stop. So Solomon also developed. How am I going to count all that stuff back there? People are just bringing in this stuff for the dog. How am I going to count all that? I have no idea. I'll just call it a draw. We'll see. I don't know. Yeah, how am I going to sort that? I have no idea how to sort that. Give me anxiety. Oh, yeah, he's just laughing. Debbie's back there just laughing at me. Okay. Move that to the other table. It's not my fault what happened last week, okay? It's not my fault. Not my fault. So King Solomon developed important relationships with Tyre and Egypt. He established a mutually lucrative alliance with Hiram, king of Tyre. So this is when he is building his temple, right? Especially for this year. So Solomon was supplied with cedar and pine from Lebanon. You know that's why they have a tree on their flag, right? Lebanon, because they're known for their lumber, their trees. Yep. Skilled artisans for his building projects. He drafted Tyrian sailors into his navy because Israelites were just not that good of sailors, right? So why not get someone who's from the coast who knows how to sail, right? And here's your proof. 1 Kings 9:26 through 27 says right here, King Solomon also built ships at Ezion Geber, which is near Elath in Edom, which is kind of near the coast of the sea. And Hiram sent his sailors who knew the sea, to serve in the fleet with King Solomon's men. Okay. So then, along with Phoenician ships sailing alongside them, and we've already talked about Phoenician ships a long time ago. They were really, really great shipbuilders in Phoenicia. Also, remember what they're also known for in Phoenicia? The color purple, right? They were the ones who could dye things purple. Very, very expensive. A lot of snails. We'll stop right there, and we'll pick up here next week. Thank you for listening to this Unwise Person.